Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has for training the next generation to live a life consistent with a biblical worldview. If you've been listening and you like what you hear, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button or leave a review. That'll let others know the show's worth checking out and certainly help spread the word and serve our mission to make a difference. So thank you and again in advance for being here and helping us advance the cause of Christian education. For the first time in American history, Christian organizations do not represent mainstream American culture. Those people and institutions that do not subscribe to a biblical worldview have succeeded in relegating Christianity to the margins. That is, convincing the culture that religion is a private matter and should have no influence in the public square. We see this play out frequently in the court systems, as Christian companies must often defend their biblical positions against discrimination charges or some supposed violation of church and state principles. So how does a Christian organization stay true to its mission when that mission becomes countercultural? In the award-winning book Mission Drift, the authors assert that without careful attention, faith-based organizations will inevitably drift from their founding mission. They say it's become the exception that an organization will stay true to its mission. Well, that's a sobering thought for those of us leading the movement of Christian education. So there's two things Christian organizational leaders must do to prepare for what may be around the corner and stay true to our mission. First, we must constantly evaluate what must change and what must never change. And second, we must constantly speak to who we are, what we stand for, and how our beliefs drive our behavior. In other words, we've got to be speaking to our core values, our philosophy, and our mission. Well, these behaviors are powerful enough to keep us from mission drift, but they're not always easy because there are so many variables in education that impact our success. The teachers who deliver our mission and the communication that comes from our offices are clear examples of powerful voices capable of both protecting from and promoting mission drift. Well, our guest today lives in this world at the Christian college level. I know this is a topic in which he brings great conviction. Our guest is Jay McCurry. He's the Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Randall University in Moore, Oklahoma. He holds graduate degrees in Ed Leadership and Christian Education from Oakland City University, Pillsbury College, and Oral Roberts University, and is passionate about equipping students to live out their faith with clarity, purpose, and boldness. Dr. McCurry previously held leadership positions with ACSI, which included directing state advocacy programs for K-12 Christian schools. This is where we met years ago, and I've always appreciated Jay's heart for Christian schools and their leaders. So, Jay, welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, Cy. I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's just an honor to spend the next few minutes and share my heart. And I just want to say what a blessing this program has been to me, following you when you started this. And I have just learned so much. So I just want to say thank you to you and your team for putting this program together and bringing in just fantastic guests. And I just appreciate being here.
Well, thank you. No, great having you. Appreciate all you do, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you and follow your work, and thank you again. Well, let's jump in then. I want to talk about how to prevent mission drift today and why that matters, and then how this challenge impacts our work with teachers and our communication strategies as leaders. So let's start with your role at Randall University there, and we'll talk about both the post-secondary schools, of course, and Christian K-12s. But as I implied earlier, you live really in this world where you're constantly on guard against mission drift. And I just read in Colson email that came earlier this week that I think it was Trinity Christian College in Illinois announced that they're going to be closing. Another Trinity, one of the universities there, moved their graduate school online, or should say undergraduate online. Right. And then was it Crown College maybe closing, something like that. And so there was just this reinforcement for what I'm just saying. Are these mission drift issues? But why is this such a challenge for Christian colleges today?
Yeah, I think they are, and I don't know specifically with those. Unfortunately, I think they're hard stories to hear, and I think we are going to continue to hear these stories as the culture continues to go the direction that it's going. I'm not surprised that we are going to continue to face these challenges. So my heart goes out to these institutions that have stood, and for whatever reason, maybe they're not with us any longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Variables that tend to impact mission drift. The research says, hey, there's things why schools drift from financial stability, typically growth or cultural acceptance. Which one do you believe is the strongest driver of drift that we have to guard against, even at both the K-12 level and at the post-secondary level?
Yeah, I think it's financial. I think the financial pressure is going to be the most powerful driver of the drift. So I believe when budgets tighten and institutions can be tempted to widen their admission pool, they then soften their theological expectations or maybe even eliminate mission-centric programs altogether to attract those students. Like you were just talking, we have seen these nationally. Institutions that once had very strong doctrinal anchors, they now avoid theological clarity for fear. I believe it's a fear of shrinking enrollment or of losing donors. I just want to say that mission drift, it's a constant challenge because of the cultural pressure to conform is stronger than ever. Barna's research, I saw some research from George Barna, and they said that the recent worldview research shows that only 4% of Americans hold to a biblical worldview. And Pew reports that Gen Z is the least religiously affiliated generation in U.S. history. When the dominant culture currents run counter to Scripture, institutions can unintentionally adjust their practices, their language, and their priorities to fit the moment. So I say this as a brother in the Lord. Just in love and just as a brother. If you are the leader of an organization that has Christian in its name, if you are the leader of a school or an association or a church, you are walking a very thin line. You're walking on thin ice if you are trying to balance out operating through a biblical worldview and then what is happening culturally to us. And I believe that we will see judgment on those organizations because you have individuals on the inside, employees that's why they are there. They are there to serve an institution that has a strong biblical worldview foundation. You have individuals on the outside. You have parents that they want to send students to that school, and if that foundation begins to get watered down, then I believe that's the breakdown and the start of what we're seeing around the country.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think I've said this maybe on this show before, but definitely in other circles, that I have noticed in my tenure that the clear statements I make publicly on our Christian convictions and
Yes.
our bold stance for truth, the
Yes.
more applause I get from
Yes.
our customers. And in other words, yes, the more loyal they become, and that's really what they're searching for. And as a matter of fact, this podcast has been a great platform for that, to even let our constituents know this is their leader and this is what the school believes and things like that. And so you're right. I think leaders sometimes miss that that component that, boy, your customers want you to go ahead and step out there and say with great conviction what it is you believe and why you believe it. Like I said at the outset, they're yearning for that. And maybe that's why only 4% of them have a biblical worldview, because they're not exactly sure really what all that entails.
Right.
And so in the bigger picture, you and I would say, well, probably because 90% of the country went to a government school.
Right.
And so they may be a believer and they may have been saved when they were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, but they've never had any marriage of what they learned in school with their faith. And so this idea of having a useful biblical worldview that functions well in society, they wish they had it, but they don't. And that's why they're sending them to us.
That's why they're there. And I would just say, as an organization, as a school, never apologize. Never apologize for the stance that you're taking, for the foundation. It is going to continue to get more and more difficult. And it's going to take leaders in these organizations, these associations, who refuse to compromise.
Yeah, great point. Well, I'm sure a lot of us, even myself included to some degree, although I probably know a little bit about this, obviously having been close to the post-secondary level, but the role of the provost, that would probably be something that a lot of listeners would say, I'm not really exactly sure what the chief academic officer or the provost does at a university. How is your role responsible for guarding against mission drift? How do you safeguard the university in that way?
Yeah, great question. As provost, I guard first and foremost our faculty hiring. So I want to make sure that an individual's worldview is formative, is more formative than what their resume shows. I want to protect the front line of our classroom. And so when we have those initial conversations, interviews with potential professors, staff folks coming in, that is first and foremost, and again, unapologetic of the questions I'm asking, and I want to see where they're at with their worldview. So first would be my faculty hiring. Second would be my curriculum fidelity. So I want to make sure that every program, it reflects our mission, that it not merely adds Christian language around secular goals, but that it is in line and in step with our mission statement. And then I'm looking at our academic policies. I want to make sure that we ensure learning outcomes, assessment, student development practices, and those all align with a biblical anthropology. And again, our chapels, our spiritual formation, these are our core practices that shape the heart of the institution. So for me, as provost, I'm looking at our faculty and staff. I'm looking at our curriculum, our academic policies, and then spiritual formation. And that really kind of keeps centered where we need to safeguard.
Yeah, that's a big role, and even a school, the size of Randall, you may not be like Liberty's size, but you still have a ton of programs and a ton of faculty members and a ton of offerings, and you probably have online courses, and you have these. And there's a lot to keep track of for sure. And you're making a lot of decisions, and you mentioned that, and that's where I was headed next. But I like that you said that those things really, the decisions you make with curriculum, and they really have to reflect your mission. And so I assume you're coming back to that just nonstop, correct?
That's correct. And in my role, most roles of a provost, they just kind of oversee the academic side of things. My role is a little bit unique. I oversee our athletic program. I oversee our student affairs. I oversee our recruiting, admissions. And so, we have a large athletic program. So I had a conversation over the summer with my athletic director, and I said, as your coaches are out across the U.S. recruiting, I want to make sure that we're recruiting students that are mission fit for our university. They're not just here to play basketball or soccer, but they're here because we're teaching from a biblical worldview. I want them to win. I want to have a great basketball season, great soccer season, great baseball season, but there's more to it than that. Just that. So it's those conversations having ahead of time. We're really seeing the fruit of that now because of the recruiting that took place within our athletic. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, and I did not expect you to be supervising athletics, so that's pretty interesting. Yeah, that's great. But I remember Brian. Yeah, exactly. I remember Brian asking me this question one time. What do you do when, on the flip side of that, and we've all been there, right? When you get someone that's not a mission fit. Maybe just, and I don't mean like the process of unenrolling someone, but how do things break down? Why is that so important for somebody maybe who's not familiar with our work when we say, boy, we have to get customers that are good mission fit? Well, what happens when they're not? What's it look like at your level?
Yeah, I think if it's a student, it's a difference between if it's a student or a faculty person. Right. So, hopefully with a faculty person, we've already had those conversations before they ever get in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I think for a student, it's having those conversations. I mean, it's sitting down and making sure that, and maybe they've already enrolled, and just saying, hey, we just need to make sure that we're a fit. And it's nothing against you or against us, but I love the quote. Aristotle says, educating the heart or educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And so I don't ever want to lose that, that personal touch of being able to sit down with a student or a faculty member and just say, hey, let me tell you where we're coming from. This is our goal. We're unapologetic about it, but I want you to come with us. And if they can't, then then we need to be able to respectfully kind of go our separate ways. But
yeah, that's great. And I use something similar this year with my school year theme and our banquet and just things like that. I'm talking about, I love our tagline because it relates to exactly what you said with, the quote there. What fills their mind shapes their heart.
That's correct.
And so if your mind is not on the same page, in other words, if you're not a mission fit because you're really not believing what it is that we're selling, you're not bought in, well, your heart's going to follow your mind, and so your behavior is going to walk itself out in a way that doesn't align with the values of this university or this K-12 school, because your mind's not on board, and these two things are inseparably bound together. Why? Because that's how God made us. Right. And you can't differentiate those two. So that's why it's so important. So it's exactly what you just said. Well,
I don't want to just give out a degree. I mean, we give out our diplomas, we give out degrees, but we are training up leaders to go out and impact the kingdom. And I mean, we're raising up disciples and individuals to go out and influence the kingdom of God. And so a lot of times you can't. There has to be this one-on-one relationship and be able to speak into the lives of students, and they need to have that desire. If they don't have that desire, then really at that point we just continue to just pray for them and pray that their hearts would be turned.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, right. Speaking of our students, and you more so than here, but K-12 private schools, very transient. People come and go all the time. It's not a traditional government school where you moved into the district and bought a house at the Mansfield Christian District, and so you have to go here. Right? That doesn't happen. But even more so at your level, you're only there for 4 years at best, probably. Right. Maybe some graduate school or something like that. But you constantly have new customers every year, transfers, things like that. But you also have new generations of parents that are rolling in, and so you just. One graduates, you move them in. I mean, that just happens also. But then even new employees. And so what are some of the new dynamics, or really important dynamics then, that you're seeing in these new generations of students and maybe even employees that you as the provost have had to kind of say, I got to keep my eye on this because this is something new for us, or it's important to know in these Gen Zs?
Yeah, great question. Again, I'm going to revert back to Barna research. I mean, he highlights that Gen Z is spiritually curious, but they are morally confused. And they value authenticity, they value relationships and purpose, but they often arrive at Randall with what Barna calls a hybrid worldview. And it's an inconsistent blend of biblical ideas, expressive individualism, and really digital culture. I mean, this Gen Z, they're in front of their phones or screen 7 to 9 hours a day, and so really this they have this culture of being influenced so much by social media is just unbelievable. I found that younger faculty, they often bring passion and innovation, but they may lack formal biblical worldview training. Many were educated in secular graduate programs, so they know that they're disciplined well. They're an expert in their field, but they've never really been shown how to think Christianly about it. And so we want to make sure that we give them the tools and the resources and the support to be able to take that expertise and then be able to filter that through a biblical worldview.
Well, that's a great point, and those are good stats from Barna to keep in mind. And I don't think people realize that, this up-and-coming group of teachers is not too far removed from the Gen Z students that we see right now. So they're going to have a lot of those same dynamics in play, and they may have been a believer for a long time. But again, they have not been trained, like you said, in biblical worldview. So their capacity to do this well intellectually at the college level is high, but then are they, communicating what it is that we want them to communicate? Very different from what Gen Z, has experienced, because again, they're not too far removed. So in what ways do you work with those teachers then to try to protect from mission drift? Because if they're, maybe even if they're young believers or they just don't have a lot of biblical worldview training, they met your standards to get in, but they struggle really communicating that biblical worldview. How do you work with them to protect against that?
Well, at Randall, I talk a lot about them being living curriculum teachers and living curriculum professors, and so not just not just up in front of the class and sharing information, but really, I want them to share who they are. I mean, and really get a hold of what it means to be a living curriculum instructor, not just relying on a book or a textbook or lesson plan, but allowing them to share what they've experienced, what they've learned, and allow that to lead the class. I do that by really setting clear expectations about worldview in both teaching and mentoring. So again, even goes back to the hiring when I'm looking at bringing in a new instructor. I want to be very, very clear on what my expectations are. We have ongoing development, so we provide training on biblical worldview, cultural apologetics, Christian philosophy, and education. And so that's constantly ongoing modeling. They need to see, new teachers need to see what healthy integration, what it looks like, and how it's done well. And again, accountability. So we're looking at syllabi reviews, classroom observations, formative conversations, and those help keep us aligned. So it's communication. It's not just sticking a new person in the classroom, but making sure that they have the tools that they need. We just finished a book study this past fall. And then we'll be starting another one. So that's just another way of making sure that everybody's on the same track. We're all talking the same language, and we're all going the same direction.
Yeah, I think what I've seen the most, and that's great, what I've seen the most is, and definitely at the K-12 level, but you probably even get it at your level also, is this idea of a hybrid worldview that you said earlier. I thought that was a great point too, in that, and they don't even realize they're doing it many times, and that is that because of the lack of intellectual training to get ready for this position, perhaps, they're still keeping their faith separate from, their lessons or from the content or something like that. And so they don't realize that they've got a sacred secular divide, as some of the authors stated, and they don't think maybe that way. But how it comes across in the classroom is that way. And we always tell our teachers, if that lesson looks exactly the same way at the public school down the street,
what's the difference?
What am I paying you for? Yeah, that's exactly right. And so you have to see it completely different so that, again, we are teaching from a biblical worldview. So, yeah, you're exactly right. And I bet you, unfortunately that happens at the college level just like it does the high school level. And that's a shame, and we have to guard against it.
Yeah, I shared a quote from Socrates with our faculty, and it says, "Education is the kindling of the flame, not the filling of a vessel." So as they come in as a living curriculum instructor, I want them to kindle that flame, that desire to learn with our students, not just to be a vessel filler. And for students come in, they sit for 40 or 50 minutes. You're just spewing out knowledge. I want more than that. Yeah. And so I think it's an ongoing process. I don't know if we'll ever arrive, but we're gonna keep keep the main thing the main
that's
thing.
right. Yeah, you got to work harder on it. And I think we're going to have to keep working harder and harder and harder because of just what I said in the outset. You're going to continue to get kids that have come up through this culture. Right. And like I said, maybe went to government schools, no background, but heavy influence of social media. We didn't even talk about that, but that's a whole other episode. But, right, if you were raised on that, even as a believer,
right.
I mean, even wonderful Christian families, it's hard to say, no, what, we're not going to do social media at all because it's just nothing but bad. Well, Lord bless you. It's going to be a challenge, at least, avoiding that smartphone. Now, maybe you can avoid, different social media platforms. Certainly. I mean, I do that as well. But that smartphone is going to introduce you to more things that are, a challenge to work through. But it's going to be tough to move forward without it. Well, as leaders, we're constantly communicating, and what we communicate and how we communicate are certainly critical to our success. And as I said at the outset, when your mission is countercultural, why is your careful communications, so important today to guard against mission drift and all those things?
Mm-hmm. I believe clarity is kindness, Cy. I mean, a countercultural mission requires us to communicate truthfully. We need to communicate consistently and graciously. Barna's research shows younger generations, they distrust institutions. Therefore, mixed messages, they erode credibility. If our mission is distinctly Christian, then our communication must be intentional. It must be biblical, and it must be steady. It can never be reactionary, and it cannot be ambiguous. So I believe it. I mean, we must be very strategic with our communication. We must be very clear with it and make sure that our message is very clear. And that kind of circles back to what we started off the program on. I mean, when we're not clear on what we're teaching and what our values, our mission is, then everything just breaks down from that point. Yeah,
that's exactly right. What are some communication strategies that you've employed there at Randall that have really helped you be consistent now? Have you brought anything new to the table there?
Well, of course, we do faculty orientation. We continue training, which is rooted in our mission. For me, I do a weekly email that goes out to all of our faculty and staff, goes out to hundreds of individuals every Friday morning, and it goes out. I already have mine finished for this coming week, and that goes out to our stakeholders, our board members, all of our employees, and that has been probably one of the best tools I have used. Just that consistent messaging, keeping our goals out in front. I'll talk about some biblical worldview, our mission, maybe some history of the university. I may share a couple of announcements, but it's keeping it out in front, and it's consistent to all of our stakeholders. Again, consistent messaging through our chapel services, all of our recruiting events, all of our marketing, our academic structures. That includes our program reviews, our assessment plans, curriculum designs. All that is built around a biblical worldview. So it's just repetition. I mean, I say repetition builds culture, and our mission, it must be heard, it must be seen, and it must be felt. And I want to utilize every opportunity I can to get that communication out.
Yeah, it sounds like that email's been a big win.
Yeah, also to our stakeholders as well.
Right. So are you sending that email to your parents?
Not to the parents. That only goes to faculty, staff, board.
Okay.
General stakeholders.
How do you communicate with parents at the college level? K-12, that's a big deal for us because the child could be, under 10 years of age. So we're talking to mom and dad often. But how do you do that at the college level with some of those dynamics?
We do. We utilize social media quite a bit, and we have quite a few large events on campus. Our school is affiliated with the Free Will Baptist denomination, and so it's pretty tight-knit. And so we're constantly out in the churches and getting that message out, and always having events on campus that we're welcoming families back in. It's a little interesting because, once a student turns 18, I mean, there's some things you can and you can't share with parents, and so
Yeah, right.
From an academic side, we have to be cautious of that, but we want to be free in that we're always constantly communicating our mission and getting that out to those families.
You made an interesting comment earlier too about how this generation is naturally distrustful, and I think that was a good point to make, because they hear conflicting messages and they don't know who to believe, so they're naturally skeptical and things like that. So clarity certainly important, and I would say frequency, consistency, all those things. I mean, I don't know, have you picked up on in your short time there anything yet, even at the university level, where you say, well, with this age group, 18 to 22, this is something that they really appreciate when it comes to being communicated with, or the type of message? Is there some little nugget for that age group that you've picked up on already that helps them be more trusting in what you're trying to say?
I would just say it's that one-on-one.
That's a good point.
I think, and we as leaders, my day's planned out. And most of our faculty, they're in class, they have office hours, we have boom, 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 boom. And you have to be very strategic to sit down and have a conversation and build a relationship with those students. For us, it's interesting. We eat on campus, and so we have cafeteria, and they're round tables, and nothing's separated. You could be eating with our president, or you could be eating with guys from the baseball team or ladies from the basketball team. Every day is different. And I would say that time right there has been probably the biggest. I don't see students on their phones. They are engaged in conversation, and it's been a great way of building those relationships. And we have families that come in and join us for that. So going back to your previous question, how do we communicate? So there's just something about sitting down and having a meal together.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would think that as they come into young adulthood, you're exactly right. Those relationships one-on-one and communicating so that they learn to trust you, and that's a reciprocal relationship there. I think that's very powerful at that level. That's really what they expect. I don't get too many kids at the K-12 level, they don't have time, right? They have 4 minutes between classes. So you have to be really intentional about that. But, sometimes when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, having a meal together looks a little different when you're 20.
Right.
Some of those conversations. Well, that's good. Well, just kind of circling and wrapping it all up. Why does this all seem to matter so much to us? This idea of mission drift, teacher worldview is important. Communication strategies are important. When you look at the bigger picture of things and people say, why do you guys talk about this so much? Where are we trying to take the culture, especially at the college level? What's your hope for those graduates of Randall?
Well, it matters because Christian education is about shaping people for the kingdom. It's not simply about awarding degrees. And I shared earlier, we're forming disciples, we're forming scholars and leaders that will enter a world that is spiritually confused and morally directionless. They have no direction when it comes to morals. So if we drift, if we lose our witness, but if we remain faithful, we help to anchor a generation to the truth of God's word and advance the gospel in every sphere of influence. So it's not just about awarding a degree, but about raising up future leaders that will, when they leave here, will go out and impact the kingdom for Jesus Christ.
Yeah, amen. That's what I say often, and that's what I try to build this whole podcast around, really a movement. I like to call it a movement because I really
It's a
try
movement. Yes.
to say that, hey, we need the Randalls and the Mansfield Christians and these other schools to be united in purpose so that we can move this culture, like you
Yes.
said, impact the culture for Christ and move it back to where we know
Yes.
it belongs, and not, as I said from the outset, just say, well, it's no longer a Christian society. That's just the way it goes.
Right.
Christianity's just on the margins. We're just going to have to, fold our tents and, be content to live on the margins. No, this country's never been about that. But suddenly that's where we find ourselves. And schools like Randall and schools like MCS exist to turn that tide. So I appreciate that. And what you do is extremely important. So we want to make sure we keep you and Randall in our prayers because you got a big job there.
Well, and the same with you. I mean, we're pulling students from all walks of life, and but influencing students on the K-12 side and having their hearts. And we all know the research of a child coming to saving knowledge of Jesus at a younger age is so much easier than when they're older. So I just appreciate what you're doing on the K-12 side and just having a tremendous impact. You are a great leader across the U.S. and a great example of what a fantastic school is doing and should be doing.
Well,
and I'm so thankful for you.
Appreciate that. No, appreciate that. Well, if they want to know more about Dr. J. McCurry and they want to know more about Randall, if that sparks some interest, what should they do? How can they get online or follow, or what do you recommend?
You bet. I mean, check out our website. It's just ru.edu, and we're on social media. I'm on social media. I have LinkedIn page and a couple of platforms, and of course the school has all the different platforms, but they want to find out anything about the university, it's all at ru.edu.
Oh, awesome. Good. Well, I encourage the audience to do that and follow along with what Jay is doing there, and it's just really good work. Well, as we close, let me make 2 chalkboard points for you to consider remembering from this episode. Point number 1. The pressures of mission drift are guaranteed. New customers and new employees bring new perspectives, and cultural shifts bring new priorities and demands. This doesn't mean we should avoid organizational change. In fact, leaders must always grow and adapt and assess what must change in the workplace. But leaders who guard against mission drift are also evaluating what must never change. They stay true to their mission by making changes that do not alter their core identity. And we talked about that a lot today. Point number 2, more critical than new programs, academic achievements, or athletic success is what a school believes. Our schools must make it increasingly clear just who we are, what it is that we believe, and why we believe it. Our convictions and core values matter because children and parents desperately need us to be true to who we are. Saturated in a culture that leaves Christianity out of public conversations, these kids are searching for answers and seeking truth. And that's normal because that's how we're made as humans. But we're also made to understand that it's only in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, as it says in Colossians 2:3. Well, that's our lesson for today. And now you know more. And when you know more, you can do more. You can not only think differently, but you can act differently, make a change, live out your convictions, and you can say no more if you must. Well, thank you again for joining me today on Clearly Christian Podcast, and I trust that now you do know more about what we can do as leaders to prevent mission drift and why it matters so much in a culture that is desperate for truth. Again, if you like the show, let us know by following or subscribing. Hit the like button. That'll let others know the show's worth checking out. I certainly would appreciate that. Remember, the only way we're going to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview and live that out. And the greatest hope to get there is Christian education. I'm Dr. Cy Smith. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.